Okay, we're back with episode 2. If you haven't heard episode 1, go back and listen or watch that. It's on YouTube, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you watch podcasts. Let's get going.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
So as you know, Jonathan, retail is all about location, location, location. And we've talked about timing and making some really good early decisions that paid off. How challenging was it to identify and land the first site in Pineville, North Carolina, a location that is still open and thriving today, 20 years later, that will be celebrating by the time this airs, we'll have celebrated its 20-year anniversary?
Yeah. I mean, I drove by there the other day taking Sims was going to a field hockey game down there. I said, I can drive by Ashley Pineville. So, I mean, what a great looking store that is, and an incredible location. It's amazing that 20 years later, it's still a great spot to be. So Jackson knew more about real estate than I did, which I knew nothing about real estate. Didn't even really know it was a thing. And so we were really kind of flying blind, and met with a few real estate brokers. Didn't really know what to ask, what to look for. Had a couple folks show us around, and we just did not have this great feeling that we had the perfect site and the perfect advisor, consultant. And the day we were leaving, I think we had some meeting with someone, and they had a business journal in the office. And so I picked up the business journal, and it just so happened to be once a year they do these, best of the best or awards, top producer awards. And we're looking through, and I was like, this maybe, and I was looking for some of the people we had met with. None of them were the top producers, which was a red flag immediately. But there was this one guy whose name just kept coming up, Dale Hall. And I mean, he won every retail award you could win. And his firm, New South, was involved, it felt like, in every transaction. And so we just cold call Dale, and he answered, which is in hindsight, knowing what we know now about real estate, that's amazing that he answered and took the meeting. And he met with us, and we had a hard time finding the office. And I think I was like, Jackson, let's just go. Let's just get back to Nashville. Like this, and Jackson was persistent as he can be. And so we sit down with Dale, and I mean, again, like one of those vivid memories of 20 plus years ago, but he comes in, and we had given him just a brief synopsis of who Ashley was, and that there was an Ashley Furniture Home store coming in. And he sits down, he lays this package down. He says, "This is where your first store should be." And it was where the Best Buy was in Pineville. And he said, "This isn't public knowledge, but Best Buy's moving across the street. We're working on that deal. They're going to have to sublease the space. You're the perfect tenant. Let's start working on sublease." So again, just like amazingly fortunate and great timing. I think one of the common threads through all this is I kind of think about it and look about it is how many people helped us along the way, and how fortunate we were to find the right people at the right time, and listen to them in a lot of ways. And so Dale turned into, if not our most trusted advisor and he's still to this day, I think, your real estate guy, and he taught us a tremendous amount about real estate and leases and business in general. And so, I mean, you have to say what an important part of what Broad River is. You can't talk about that without talking about Dale and that meeting, that day. And side note, he's also become one of, my closest friends, and lives kind of our houses close to each other, and talk to him almost every day. So, those relationships that you form with people who helped build the business, and this is a kind of rabbit trail, but it is also really good to have relationships with people who have seen the whole journey and have that context. So, you and I have a lot of context with each other, and it's just a deeper understanding of, hey, this wasn't an overnight success. This was hard. This was risky. So anyway, it's cool to have those depth of relationships.
Well, Dale, often tell him he knows this, he is a part of our team. He's an extended part of the family. He's also become a good friend. And I didn't deal with the real estate when you were handling it, but now since, we've changed roles and I do handle it and we'll talk to them often. And I'm surprised by people who aren't speaking with their real estate brokers often in the market. Like, well, who do you have? Who, like the fact that, and I think it's the Charlotte Business Journal book of lists. So you go and find the number one commercial brokers and you're not even a company yet at that point. What, so you moved in February of 2002. Was this before you moved that you were taking these meetings?
Yeah. So this would have been that summer before.
Oh, wow.
When we had first kind of settled on Ashley, we had first settled, maybe early fall, had first settled on Ashley and had talked about the Charlotte market. And, one of the things they said was, we'll go find the perfect location. And so that's what we were doing.
Okay. Yeah. And I said, it was February 2003 that you moved to Charlotte. Mm-hmm. So this was summer of 2002. Right. You're about to leave. You had some other brokers, showed you some other sites. You get the meeting with Dale Hall of New South Properties, who's partners with Will Whitley, both do a great job and become good friends. And then he shows you around and says, this is what you need. The site's not even on the market, publicly listed yet. It's going to be a sublease because Best Buy is moving. It's on Furniture Row. It's the first big box on Furniture Row, across the street from Rooms to Go, next to what was then a Toys R Us. And then you have a Haverty's and Ethan Allen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and Bassett. And so he said, this is where you need to be. But you had to convince Best Buy to sublease their store to you and Jackson. And I guess you didn't even have a company name at that point. So how did you convince Best Buy that you guys were who you were?
Well, I think, a lot of that was we just tried to focus on other parts of the lease until we had it fully negotiated and we were all the way down the road. And they said, oh, by the way, will you send the financials? And never once did we tell them that we were Ashley Furniture corporate or that credit, but maybe they had that assumption. And so Dale called and he said, yeah, their brokers really ain't. We had to send our financials. So, I mean, again, my financials were, school debt. It was all on one side of the ledger. And so he's like, do you know these guys are in college? So I think he was pretty worked up and pretty angry, but we were far enough down the road to where they just decided it was a risk worth taking. And so, it turned out okay for Best Buy. We and one thing that I think I always take some pride in and everyone in the company should is we've never so much as defaulted on a technicality in a lease. And so we've always lived up to what we said we were going to do. And people on the other side of our deals have always gotten exactly what we told them they would get. And I take a lot of pride in that.
So many people think of Ashley stores as a franchise business. We get that question a lot. As you and I have had to explain thousands of times, it's a licensee business and not a franchise business. With that being said, it's certainly part of a national and well-known network as opposed to an individual concept or a solo concept like Miskelly Furniture that's got multiple brands. Why did you choose to partner with Ashley Furniture instead of going solo as a multi-line retail concept?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we recognize is we really didn't know much about the furniture space at all. And certainly the retail furniture side. And Ashley, at the time, was operating some retail stores and was learning the retail market. And so they presented, a front of, hey, we're experts in the retail space. It turned out that we learned together a lot about retail. But I think just that having some strength behind us and having, one thing I would probably not, a term I would not use to describe, and this is regrettable, but Jackson and I, specifically back in those days would be humility, but we had enough humility to understand that we didn't know what we were doing and we needed a lot of support. And ultimately Ashley absolutely provided that and gave us a framework to build the business on.
Wonderful. And so Ashley said, go look in Charlotte and find a site. You find the site, you're going in parallel, negotiating your lease with Best Buy. At some point that gets signed. How did you ultimately convince Ashley Furniture to award the Charlotte market to two young, soon-to-be MBA grads, but at the time, MBA students starting up a new business in this relatively large new market?
Yeah, I knew you'd ask that question, and I don't think there's like this one crystallizing moment where Ashley said, we're going to give these kids this market. I think it was just a constant kind of march forward from our perspective and not taking no or not taking, they'd try to focus us somewhere else or give us a roadblock. And I think we were just we always talked about, burning the boats, the story about the two armies who are going to meet on an island, and as the last soldier gets off one of them, he burns all their boats, and they said, what are you doing? And he says, well, now we can't go home and they can. So we kind of burned the boats and in a lot of ways at that point. So it was just a slow drip decision, I think, from Ashley's perspective. And at some point they looked up and said, well, maybe we don't have a choice. We have to give it to them. So, so I think it was more just a slow, methodical continuation of work, on Jackson and I's part to get that done.
With a lot of intentionality. I mean, I go back to, so you and I knew each other because before you went to Vanderbilt, you were at the Godwin Group. I was at D2 Interactive, a web development firm, and we worked on projects together. Yeah. You went to Vanderbilt, started your MBA degree, then you finished your first year. I remember you came to me with this idea and you wanted to present something to Ashley to go e-commerce. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
And one thing we did, you said you needed a domain name. We got shopashley.com early on as our domain name. This was August 2002. And I think the first project I worked on for Ashley was a pro bono mock-up of here's what presenting to Ben Thorud 20 plus years ago on a website, and but just mock-up website designs and that sort of thing. So it's interesting how that kind of would later parlay into what I ended up doing in retail. But you're working on all this intentionality, which is you've got the lease going, you've got the location, you've got the real estate broker. Now you're getting awarded the market in the Southeast in a vibrant, growing young market. But you got to build the store. So now there's construction. So going back to how we opened this interview, what do you recall from the initial construction project in Pineville? Once you signed the original lease, when did you and Jackson moved to Charlotte to avoid a snowstorm in February 2003 from Nashville. Jackson was married at the time, correct? But you weren't, and neither of you had any children, if I recall correctly. And you convinced Vanderbilt to allow you to graduate and give you your degree after you'd moved away. So just the construction, tell us about how long the construction project took. What do you recall from when you moved to Charlotte and all the things you had to do to get the store ready to open? That spring of 2003.
Yeah, I mean, some of that's going to be a blur because it really was just, it was like, what is the catastrophe going to be today? What did we not know we were supposed to be doing? And, even things that, today are relatively simple were a Herculean task, tagging the floor, and learning how to create a package tag and build something that ultimately made sense to a customer on a pricing tag would take hours. And it was just a lot of work. The construction project was like most construction projects, and a little bit of a mess and behind and over budget. And so it was just, and we really didn't have a lot of capital. And so we were having to cut corners and it felt really good years later to come back and undo some of those mistakes. Lighting, for example, in Pineville, we operated there for, I don't know, maybe a decade with subpar lighting and so it felt good to come back and fix some of that. But yeah, it's hard to remember the specifics because it was just, every day body blows, and we were just kind of trying to deal. But we had, I think we had a team that was dedicated, even though it was just an idea. Celeste Bundy, and we'll get into some of these people later, but Celeste was working really hard. Janet joined us and became the package tag guru, and has probably created, more package tags than any other person on the face of the planet. So, but those days were challenging. But, I was talking to a guy the other day who was telling me all the challenges he's in building a business, and it's clear that this guy's going to be successful in his business. And it's easy to say this in hindsight, but I said, relish this time, do a little better job than I did of remembering how scary this is and how hard it is. Cause good things are hard to do a lot of times. And so, So I look back on it with like, I wish I'd had a little bit of that perspective, and that may not be possible to have that perspective when you're in the fight, but looking back, it's like a time that I have some fondness around, like just how singularly focused we were,
Yeah.
and how hard the work was, but how rewarding it was too.
That's awesome. Okay, so the first year memories and biggest learnings. I almost called this mistakes, but learnings, right? So your first year the store was open. I'm sure that there were several first milestones, first sale, first $100,000, first, Magic Saturday, whatever you want to call it. Several things to celebrate, as well as those learning moments. So from what you can recall, what are some of your favorite memories from the first 12 months or so of Pineville being open for business?
Yeah, I mean, there's some good stuff in there. I mean, again, like wondering what the catastrophe of the day was going to be was kind of the common theme. One day, our controller walked in my office and she said, "Hey, I think I just realized we haven't been paying taxes, sales tax yet."
You're collecting it, but you're not paying it.
Yeah, and which is not a good thing. Just for those that don't know. So. And you're just like, are you kidding me? Like, what is going on here? And it was like something like that almost every day.
Well, that's a pretty big one.
That was a bad one. That was a tough one. Yeah, that was maybe the worst. But yeah, I mean, we would need, to really dig into all the mistakes would take more time than anybody would care to give us. But I think, most of the mistakes, like the learnings, the mistakes, if I could go back, my regrets, let's say, are not really understanding how important at the time. I mean, I was 24, not that that's an excuse. I was 24, 23, 25, and not understanding how important the people were and how hard they were working, and that, what they were doing was as important or more important than what I was doing. And just not having the correct level of focus on the others. That's my regret. If I could go back and change, I wouldn't change some of the, funny mistakes and some of the, loud arguments that Jackson and I would have. I mean, again, that's like something I now look back on with some fondness and think they're funny, but the true regret would be not really understanding how important the team was and how hard the team was working and how much they were doing to help the company be successful. And so, that's something I wish I could go back and undo.
Well, if they're listening right now, they got it. And, when did you have the confidence? Hey, I think we got this. I think so. This is going to work out well. Was there a moment in the first year that or were you constantly feeling the pressure of, we got to keep charging ahead, staying focused, and I can't let up?
Yeah, no, there was not a moment where, and it's certainly not in the first year, where we've got this figured out and we're going to be okay. No, I mean, and again, it was like whack-a-mole. You'd solve a problem and another one would come up, and then it became such a thing that you were just concerned about what was coming and what was unknown, and there was so much to learn. So there was no comfort whatsoever in that first year.
It's interesting that you got so many people, who agreed to come work for you in Jackson there was never an Ashley Furniture home store in the market. And some folks took leaps of faith and said, yeah, I'll leave this business or that business and come work. So you and I had known each other prior to you leaving for grad school in Nashville. And we had both become friends and work acquaintances. I mentioned you were at the Godwin Group in their interactive department, and I was running D2 Interactive. In fact, I've got a funny memory that I can recall how you tried to convince them to acquire my company, D2 Interactive, and do a spinoff that you and I would run together. But initially, how did you get the job with the Godwin Group? Did you have any internet or website experience?
No. So I didn't have a really good option coming out of college. I was, going to need to get a job. And so I'm looking around. I had a business degree, which, is a little broad. And so I thought it'd be cool to work in an ad agency. I saw that they had a job opening, but it seemed like a terrible job. And so I scheduled the interview for the job opening, and I come in. I was interviewing with Heather Osborne, who was the CFO of the company at the time. And I said, listen, Heather, it's the year 2000 and you guys don't have an interactive department, and I'm your guy. We should build an internet web focused division of this, advertising company. I can't believe you don't have it. Good news is I'm your guy. So, oh, well, we've been talking about that. And so she takes me to meet Danny Mitchell, the CEO, and I give him the same pitch, and not thinking that they're actually going to buy this. And so Danny says, "All right, that's great. We're going to do it. You're hired. We got a board meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. Can you present your plan?" And I said, "Absolutely, Danny. I'll be there at 8 a.m. And a couple of memories I have, I went to Barnes and Noble and I bought a book like HTML coding, which was the wrong, like for dummies or something. It was like the total wrong book to buy, but that's what I bought. And I stayed up all night and read it. I'd not had much, I didn't drink coffee, but I was like so tired. I drank all this coffee. So I go into this meeting, I'm like so jittery. I have no idea what I said, but the people at the time they knew less than I did about the internet. And so they bought it and, gave me a job and it, and it worked out because they did need that division. And then my sales process would be, we would meet with someone and I would pitch an idea and make up a cost. And then I would call you and say, "Charlie, can D2 Interactive do this for like 20% less than whatever I told them it would be?" And you'd figure it out. So it was a good working relationship there. There was we were flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, it was a great working relationship. I love the, you said HTML coding. I thought it was Internet for Dummies or something like that, but that you went and read that book and then presented at 8 o'clock the next morning as an expert on the internet to lead their internet division. Wanted to take that quick detour. Do you recall the first client project that you hired D2 to solve?
Oh, I do. It was a former governor of the state of Mississippi, Dick Malpas, had a tree, like a investment company where you invest in tree farms.
Timberland Investments.
Timberland Investments. And when he would type it in Yahoo at the time, not Google, he'd type it in Yahoo search. It wasn't, he'd do tree investments. It didn't come up at the top of his ranking. And so I said, "Oh, we can do that. We can get you." I had no idea. We can get you to the top, Mr. Malpas. And I think that's going to cost, probably for $10,000, we can get you there. And so I go to you and say, "Charlie, $8,000, you got to get this guy to the top of the rankings." And I don't know how you did it, but it worked.
It was great timing because they were starting to auction phrases, listings, and syndicate those out through a company called GoTo.com, and who is the and so we understood that success was be number one for Timberland Investments. And there was no FTC regulations on this newfangled way to do search. But this was before Google AdWords even learned their auction model that has created billions and billions for them. And so GoTo was like the back end way that all these search directories and websites could make money. And so I think we got that search. We got him like 6 of the top 10 listings, and then I went to Kinko's and printed them all out so that you could present that. And the firm didn't have to lose the Malpas investment group, and we were able to make him happy and then start a good business relationship. That was great. Okay, so getting back on track, thanks for that quick detour. With your first year in Pineville, I believe I can recall coming to visit you in November of 2003. So the store had been open about 6 months. And I just recall how proud you were of the store. I remember you telling me about how productive each square foot of the store needed to be to pay its rent. You're like, "See, Charlie, this block right here, it's got to pay its rent." It was quite an impressive operation 6 months in. What were some of the early mistakes that you guys made and learned from that you haven't already mentioned after 6? And I'm amazed that, how long did it take you to learn profit systems, the software to run the ERP? Were there any others? Because it seemed at November 2003 that you kind of had it figured out, but I'm sure there's still some more things that were about to unfold.
Well, we were probably starting our recruiting process on you, so I'm sure we put our best foot forward. We did not have it figured out in November 2003, but one of the things that like we were just pulling pricing out of the air. Like, we'd say, "Let's sell this sofa for $484. And then we realized like how important those last, like, you're operating a company on pretty tight margins. How important, well, why not $499? We're leaving that $15 on the table. So repricing everything. And then we repriced the entire store, which was really big effort at the time. And then I can't remember whose idea it was. I'll give Jackson the credit. It was like, we're not charging 99 cents. Like we could add, and you look at how many units we sold in the year, like that may be all the money we make or these 99 cents. So we had to reprice the store again with 99 cents on there. And
that's great.
And so, yeah, I mean, again, I've tried to forget all the mistakes, a lot of the mistakes but it was stuff like that. Just, trying to figure out the blocking and tackling of the business.
Yeah. Every $5, $10, even down to the pennies counts.
Yeah.
Not in just in making, but in saving. And so were you responsible for creating all of the package tags? I think you mentioned about package tags. You credited Janet at one point, but did you and Jackson always agree on tagging philosophy? And who was responsible for doing the package tags?
Yeah, no, we did not. I mean, at the time, Jackson and I didn't agree on what time of the day it was, so I'm sure we did not agree on the package tagging philosophy. And I can't, if I'm being honest, I can't remember which side of the fence I was on and which side of the fence he was on. Maybe you have some of that.
Well, I think I recall that he wanted everything to be price tags and you wanted consolidation to price tags.
That's right. He wanted, he wanted price tag on everything. And his point of view was, yeah, thank you. That's right. His point of view was, well, if they want to buy the end table, they need to know how much the end table costs. And I said we looked like a tag store, like we were selling tags, and the tags were like this big. They were huge. And so I think because I had a little better understanding of the system, we ended up going with my way. And so we would just have one package tag with all the little individual prices on the back. And I think that turned out fine. It allowed more interactions with the sales associates and gave them a chance to add value. And so this is how you read the tags. And so, yeah.
I love that story. Were there any other memorable first year stories? I mean, I think I recall, and this may have been in the first year, you called Peter Gignac, the Asheville licensee at the time, for ideas on managing cash. Maybe this was after you figured out that, hey, you got to pay all these back sales taxes that hadn't been paid, and the cash balance got depleted. And I think that conversation with Peter ultimately led to running tent sales to generate cash. So let's start with that one.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I mean, we thought we had, plenty of cash to fund the business, and Deborah comes in and says, hey, we haven't been paying taxes. So we write that check immediately, and now we don't have any more cash. And, Peter Gignac was the Asheville licensee and had been in all kinds of businesses and been successful in all kinds of businesses, and was just a really likable guy and always super helpful. And so I called him and laid out to him, here's what has happened. And he said, oh, you got to run a tent sale. I'm like, what? Peter, what's the tent sale? He tells me how to do it. And, so we get all the damaged product, which there was a myriad of damaged product at the time. We get it outside and this big tent, we didn't get it permitted. So City of Pineville wasn't happy. So we had to, that was something we had to learn. But then I think literally the sun starts going down, it's time to close. And we're like, well, how are we going to keep somebody from just driving up and stealing all this furniture? And so King Brown, one of my favorites of all time. King raised his hand and says, I'll stay. And so King slept out there for, I don't know however long we had the thing. He stayed out there, and we paid him. I'm sure we paid him cash to, spend the night out and protect our furniture every night.
That's great. So tent sales to generate cash if you need it. And then I remember you were advertising in the Charlotte Observer, and there was another, but that crossed into the Hickory, North Carolina market.
Yeah.
And so you actually got a surprise phone call from the licensee about that advertising that you were doing that kind of covered Hickory that they didn't pay for.
Yeah, they didn't like our. It's probably when we were charging, $484 when we should have been charging $499 for so. But they didn't like our advertising in their market, and so start looking at all our are we in the Hickory Times? Well, I'm so sorry. We don't want to be competitive with you guys. Let me figure this out. And it came to light during the conversation. They were talking about the Charlotte Observer. And I just remember going, okay, I need to understand this. You're angry at us for advertising the Charlotte licensee in the Charlotte Observer. And so that we probably didn't have the cooperative relationship with them that we had with Peter, but they didn't like us advertising in our own newspaper.
Oh, yeah. So we talked about some of your first hires and how those hires came about. Anything you want to share about? You mentioned King Brown. There's KC. You mentioned Celeste Bundy. There's Victor Medina. You mentioned Janet Limekuhler. Several others. Any first year early employees and all-stars who you want to cite?
Yeah, and I want to be careful not to start naming names because I could literally be here all day talking about all the people that were incredibly important to the company. A couple of them, and not in order of importance, but just maybe in how they pop in my head. KC, you mentioned, we got KC Jackson. Jackson had this scheme where we would go into a furniture store and he would try to find out where the break room was because they would always post the sales. And so we, if you'll remember, we never posted our sales in the break room because we didn't want other people coming in knowing who our best sales associates were. And Jackson would walk in and look and he'd say, all right, this KC guy is their number one salesperson. He was working at Haverty's. And I would talk to the sales associate and he would go in the back and try to get in the break room. He came out and said, all right, KC's number one in sales for this month. We got to hire him. And so we'd call him in and he'd say, how'd you find me? And don't worry about that. Yeah. So we hired KC. Man, KC was fun. He
would sing in the showroom a lot of times.
Always just in a good mood and just add a lot of fun to the place. And again, I want to be careful not to rank, but Janet was so important to the company those early days, and she worked so hard and took so much pride in we didn't know what we were doing. So I mean, she did so much of the work on the system and understood the system and was just so crucial to survival in those days. And then it's been just, I watched her podcast with you and just it's just really cool to see her career and how much success she's had and how much hopefully the company has been good to her and she feels that, that she's valued to the amount that she's provided. So Janet was great. Celeste was so much fun and so incredible. Also just to the company and just how valuable she was and willing to do anything and just really, I mean, it was over and above how much people cared about the company. And I think part of that was, we had burned the boats and we all had to care a lot.
It was a startup.
Yeah.
Celeste wore 20 hats, so did Janet. Janet is now our director of visual impact.
Yeah.
She's had a tremendous, great growth and leadership story. And you'll be interested to know her son just won one of the Founder Scholarship Awards. So
man, that is so cool.
Very cool. All right. That's all for episode 2 with Jonathan Ishee, co-founder and former president and CEO of Broad River Retail. Make sure to come back next week for episode 3, where we continue our conversation.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to rate, and subscribe to the podcast.